So today we're going to be going through an overview of Office 365 security. We're going to be covering Office 365 PCs. So how can you monitor your desktops, your Active Directory, your domain controllers. Also, just seeing what your users are potentially allowing that you weren't aware of for permissions into your organization, and how Microsoft brings this all under an easy, like a single pane of glass for easy management. We're going to be handling questions throughout. So if you have a question, just throw it in the chat, and love to hear from you. Really, this event is here for you. I don't really need it myself or Sendel, but yeah, so hopefully if you have even specific things that you're hoping to cover today, maybe an area that one of these areas has interested you a little bit more, put that in the chat just so that we can know where to focus a bit of our time. Anyway, so glad you guys could join us. Like I said, we're going to be going through, we're going to cover quickly a few other foundational things. One slide on data security and backups. You know, this is worst case scenario. Let's say you get breached and you now got cryptoed. You need to get your data back, and or whatever the case may be. Just what you need to be considering for that. Multi-factor authentication. We're going to also cover the threat protection suite, or advanced threat protection. If you guys are familiar, this is where the meat of the presentation is going to be about. Advanced threat protection. A lot of people think it's a single product, but really it's like a suite, just like Office 365. People used to come to me and say, oh, isn't Office 365 Word and Excel and PowerPoint? It's like, no, it's actually mailboxes and chat and SharePoint Online and all that other stuff as well. It's like a suite of products. Advanced threat protection, also a suite of products. So there's many pieces that you can buy one-off, or it can maybe comes with your licensing, but it's definitely stuff you should be taking advantage of. So we'll cover that suite in more detail. Then we're going to go through some examples and takeaways. Sendel is actually going to be doing some demos so you can see what the different admin portals look like. Microsoft's been working really hard to confuse everyone, I guess. Maybe not confuse everyone, but they're trying to streamline everything with these different products into a single dashboard. And in the process, I guess it makes it more difficult because they keep changing things. However, their final goal, they're moving towards something, which is to be able to make it easier for us as IT pros or executives to be able to see in a streamlined way the security footprint and health of an organization. So we're going to go through some of that as well. Why are we doing this? Well, obviously a lot of people are working from home these days. Global attacks are on the rise, and they are especially now with people accessing remotely. You want to make sure that well, we've been actually working on a lot of projects ourselves where we're helping people transition their on-prem into cloud to make things easier to access for their organizations, moving servers into the cloud, and in so doing, sometimes security is a little bit of a backseat, but you need to kind of look at both. Things like, you know, for instance, if somebody's logging in as your CEO from Russia, hopefully there's nobody from Russia here, but or even with myself, I log in here from Toronto, which is where I'm at, yeah, if somebody logs in from Chicago 5 minutes later with my account, I should know about it, that there's some strange activity going on. We're going to cover, so these types of things are happening. People are wire transferring money. Usually I go around the table right now and I'm actually asking the people, what are some situations you've personally encountered within your organization with somebody either doing some phishing, trying to get something, or where you've actually sent out, your organization has wire transferred money or bought gift cards and sent them out, and found out afterwards that it was a scam. So, and most organizations have fallen for this. So this is why security is so important, and there's a lot of stuff that Microsoft is doing to really make this easier. If you just click on the right little buttons and get the right settings configured and tweaked for your environment, it goes a long way in impacting your security footprint. Like I said, we're going to touch on this. Hackers are getting a lot more sophisticated. They are now coming in, finding ways into your organization. And if malware happens to make its way into a user's desktop, it tries to spread. And it doesn't only take out your current data. They've now found ways to be able to figure out what backup agents you're running and to see how is that backup agent connecting. And then it piggybacks off of that and encrypts all of your backups. So it's not like, oh shoot, we got cryptoed, now we need to recover. Let's try it. And then you go to access the backups and bam, you find out those are cryptoed too. So you're a little bit, and this happens with large organizations. A lot of people think, hey, I'm a small business. You know, this stuff shouldn't be, or this stuff doesn't happen with, you know, us as much, or whatever, or we don't have the money to be able to put these types of tools in place. Well, Microsoft really gives you the ability to have access to enterprise scale tools for dollars a month. So there's no reasons, and Microsoft does provide a way for you to be able to do these backups in a crypto protected way with Azure Backup Vaults. If you have any questions about any of this, this is what we love to do. We want to help companies like yourselves with technology, specifically around Microsoft Cloud. So feel free to reach out to us. We do this every day with our customers, so and we can answer your specific questions at that point. So next section, multi-factor authentication. If you don't have this enabled, you know, shame on you. It's one of those things. It's kind of like, you know, washing your hands these days. You need to make sure that, you know, you wash your hands for 20 seconds, you're scrubbing and you're good. It's just one of those things that we do now, or that you're not touching your face if you're going outside. Well, multi-factor authentication is that to the IT world. It is now becoming a absolute minimum standard. Microsoft says that you actually are, it eliminates 99% of the unauthorized access to your account. I hated it when we first enabled it, but now I love it because every time I go to log into something, my phone is asking me, somebody's basically telling me somebody's trying to log in, approve it or not. So I know that even if somebody had my password internally or outside, it's been, you know, found through some method, and they try to access it, I know that I'm the final authority on whether or not that person is going to be able to gain access to my system, and to know whether there's a problem. So multi-factor authentication, if you don't know what it is, it's something you have, something you are, and something you know. So having 2 out of the 3, which means, you know, have it on your cell phone, you type in a password, something you know, and then maybe something you have, which is a mobile device. Anyway, if you have questions on that, we have been helping a lot of organizations with getting that enabled. Next section, and then we're going to get into the overall advanced threat protection. So this is basically going through who's accessing my account. So you want to get alerted if there's any problems that are potentially happening. So let's say an internal employee is about to quit and they start deleting a ton of files. You want to get alerts that these files are being deleted out of your cloud account. If a hacker has gained a password because they buy these lists online and with a username and password, and then they try using that username and password from another, you know, system in Office 365, if they happen to gain access, and it's a successful login, well, how do you know it's not the actual, it's not the person's account, or the person themselves is actually accessing it, and it's actually a hacker instead? So if they gain access, usually what they do is they start creating a mail forwarding rule. So they start forwarding all the emails out of that person's account to another account. Well, the creation of that rule is often a flag as well. You want to know when people are creating forwarding rules to forward all of your company email out to a Gmail address or something. Identity protection from Microsoft is what enables you to set up these alerts. So identity protections included in something called Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 2. It's a mouthful. People say, well, is this included in my license? Well, this is a great question. There's, I think, multiple hundreds of Office 365 licenses. And for those of you guys who maybe don't know, I know they switched the names just in April, not even a month ago, where they had Microsoft 365, then they had Office 365. Now they changed the name of Office 365 items to be also Microsoft 365, but they didn't change the features. And anyway, it creates, they did this to make things easier, but it creates more confusion. And then you start these things all get renamed. We can definitely help out with navigating the best way through our advisory services on how to get these technologies, because some you can purchase one-off, some of them come as a bundle, and it really depends on every organization. You have to tell us kind of what you're looking to do, and we can help you navigate that. Don't bother spending a lot of hours trying to research this stuff, and it changes regularly as well. So anyway, so this is identity protection. And as I mentioned before, some of the examples of why we're going through this. Well, I've heard countless examples from people, especially in these roundtable type sessions where we're all sitting there together, just of horror stories that have happened, and and we don't want to be in these situations, so let's try to avoid it. All that being said, we're now at this point, which is the threat protection suite. This is the meat of the presentation, and such great products. Microsoft, I never used to consider. I've been doing this for 20 years. I never used to consider Microsoft, a leader in security by any means. There's always been third-party products that we've had for, desktops, for servers, for monitoring. So all these different products that they've invested so much money, and they actually have. I won't steal too much thunder for later, so I'll just cover this quickly. The four main products are for email protection. You think, well, hey, isn't my email protected already when I just buy a mailbox? It is, but then there's advanced. It is. So the advanced one gives you a lot of extra features, which Sendel will go through. The next one is with on-premise identities with Azure ATP. Quick example here, Sendel started going through and getting all these tools a while back enabled in our environment. He said, Jason, did you know you're sending your password in clear text on the network? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. Well, Azure ATP is what actually made that visible. And obviously we fixed all of that, but it tells you what's going on internally. So it's not just cloud, but it reports to the cloud. So that's great. Endpoints as well, your desktops, laptops, is covered with Microsoft Defender ATP. And then lastly, there's the applications that your users or your IT group are allowing third-party systems. What do they have access to in your organization? And do you even know where to look for that? We're going to cover that. So first section, like I said, advanced threat protection, and then you're going to get a break from me talking because Sendel will show us a quick example of the admin portal here. Covers off, it scans your attachments, scans your links, puts them in a detonation chamber. So it tries launching these things before your users can launch it to see if anything strange is happening. So it's proactively checking, whereas the regular mailbox doesn't proactively check, it just opens it. It tries to stop it before it comes in. This is a proactive, like proxy in a sense. Also blocks files in Teams and OneDrive, so it's more than just email protection. It also provides user impersonation, which Sendel will be able to show you in a second, protection against impersonating a user. So I'll pass it off to you, Sendel.
Thank you, Jason. So in the past, we've been doing some personalized workshops for clients. And one thing that always came up was name spoofing. or more display name spoofing, wherein like certain like accountants get an email or supposedly an email from the CEO asking them to either transfer money or send out an invoice, right? Pay an invoice. So those are the things that I see happening most of the time whenever I have this workshops. So the advanced ATP has a feature where you can actually configure this and get alerts and quarantine such emails. So thereby admins can actually look at these emails and then based on if it's an actual threat, remove them, or if it's a false positive, release them, right? So I'm going to show you a few examples. Two of the examples over here are actually real. There's one that I created, but I'll show you one by one. So in this case, we had an email sent to Jason actually. So I sent to Jason, and it said the sender's name is Lynn. Lynn is our president, and it was a message. But if you look at the from address, it's actually someone else. And I'll show you the actual message over here. I can actually go through the quarantine here, and says it's coming from Lynn, and like are you available at the moment, and send from iPad, right? Just to go and show that urgency, and people will just click on it because it comes from the president. So Office says 365 ATP actually gives protection against things like this. And I'm going to show you, this is the user based, and I'm going to show you domain based. So we see two types of domain based impersonation. In this case, the sender does show from a different person, but if you look at the sender name, it actually has our domain 360visibility.com service notification. I'm going to go into the email actually. You can preview the message, and it says 360visibility.com service notification, and it talks about a new voicemail, right? That one of the users missed a new voicemail and to open the HTML file. So you get these kind of phishing emails based on the domain, just showing the domain. And here is an interesting one. I'm going to show you. So this is an email sent to me, and it says payroll at 360 visibility, and the sender name is payroll. I'm going to go into the details here. So it shows us payroll at 360 visibility and something like verify payroll info and click on a link, right? Just phishing email. So if you look at the difference, look at the email address of payroll. So payroll at 360visibility.co. So this is a different domain that people are trying to impersonate 360visibility.com. We see a lot of clients having similar issues. So the ATP solution over here identifies this and also other characters. So you also have like Roman characters and Greek characters that can be used in a domain. And yeah, we get protection against these two. Back to you, Jason.
Thanks, Sendel. Yeah, so I've been caught by some of these things before, and just being able to have it's funny. I think these people, the attackers, really try to get you in the middle of the day when you're just going through auto processing mode. So it's like email, 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 email. And they're hoping that you get one and you just click on it. It's like, oh, you got a new voicemail, click on that link. I've done it before, and then I'm doing these presentations myself. So the I just want to make sure, is everyone able to see my screen okay? Because it seems like I've got a black screen here. I just want to make sure we're good. So Anyway, if you're not able to see it, just make a note in the chat. I'm not sure if we're having a technical issue on our side. Anyway, so with yeah, and having these rules set up, I know we just went through some of the results of the rules, but we spent some time actually entering a few rules to say, you know, if somebody's name, for instance, let's say somebody sends it, let's say Sendel receives a message and it says Jason Myler on the sender, we have that flagged as well if it's not actually coming from my email address, just so that that impersonation doesn't get through. And so some of these things need to be customized. It's available. This is only a couple dollars for the Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection. So it's a cheap way to get some much improved security. Next section is Azure Advanced Threat Protection. So with Azure Advanced Threat Protection, you actually install this on your domain controller. It's an agent. It monitors all the incoming events, passwords, users that are trying to access things in strange ways or elevated security things. So anybody that has a domain controller in their environment, this is an amazing tool. It tells you old security things that are not supported anymore, or some legacy authentication methods that might exist on your network that you don't even know are there. So if you could, all these agents that get installed on your domain controller report up to Office 365 into this location where you can see some of these signals and all the recommendations that Microsoft suggests. Microsoft spends a lot of time automating this for you for a few dollars so that you don't have to invest time monitoring it on your side. So, and as new things start to be released, they get, sorry, my phone is ringing. As new things start to come out, they actually will add this, so you're dynamically getting these updates to your environment without having to have done any work. You're just subscribing to the service that does this for you. So I'm going to pass this off to Sendel again, just to show you what some of these domain controller alerts look like in the cloud.
Thank you, Jason. So I've been doing system administration past 20 years, and one of the frustrations always visibility, right? I want to know what's happening in my network. And yeah, I've always been on Windows networks with Active Directory. So when I heard about this Azure ATP, I was actually excited because of not only what it can give us and show us, but what it takes to implement. All it takes is just a license and installing an agent on the DCs, right? So there is no other configuration on any of the workstations, just the sensors on the DCs themselves and the power of the cloud, where you can actually get to see what's happening on your internal network. So this particular piece of technology, Azure ATP, is for users who have Active Directory. So I'm going to show you a couple of alerts that we had received. So I'm going to show you the first one, where it says user and group membership reconnaissance. So what this is, and I'll tell you, so there are tools out there in the world that if anybody can use those malicious tools, even if they can get access to a regular user workstation and with a user account that has no admin rights, they can just use these tools to bring themselves to a domain admin status, right? Just by running malicious tools and what's out there. So even as admin, even if you take all the precautions on your own workstation and you practice, a good cyber hygiene, doesn't matter, because if all your users and workstations are not protected based on some of they call them kiddie scripts, right? So something that you don't have to buy, just out there on the internet, you can just get these scripts and just run them based on a regular user and just gain access. I mean, of course, it's not a straightforward process. There's a step-by-step process wherein you get to take control over your domain. And the first step is to find out who are the domain admins, which user accounts are the domain admins. So we see a similar thing happening with this alert. So we have victim on this computer sending out queries to our DC, right? Searching for all users and groups and finding out who are the enterprise admins, right? So, and we get an alert when someone starts. So this is the beginning stage of like an attack. So you can actually get alerted when something like this happens. It could be either the malicious user itself or could be a compromised computer, right? But since this being in the advanced stage, you can be alerted and take preventive measures. And here's another alert that we have. So this is actually one of our admins, and he ran a remote code on one of our DCs, right? I'm just going to go deep into this. So you can actually start looking at what the code was. And this is what I really like the power. So rather than, like find out, it gives me visibility on what the actual user did and what code, right? So even if it was a legitimate use, it gives you a reason, find out, okay, why this person is running such a code, and actually helps you in investigating. So these are just a couple of alerts that you can get, but there's a lot more when it comes to this Azure ATP, because it's all cloud-based. It takes all these signals from all your domain controller and sends them over to the cloud for processing. And it actually helps in something called an identity security posture. And I'm going to show you. So it checks your Windows network based on different features. I'll give you this one example. Jason must have mentioned it earlier about stop clear text credentials exposure. So where this could happen is, let's say you have a multifunction printer and you're configured it for LDAP, wherein rather than type in each user to scan to either the email address or other shared folder, you query that from an address book based on your Active Directory. So most people actually configure their multifunction printers with the servers based on LDAP. And if you do not configure LDAP to be secure, you're actually sending out the admin account that you configured on the printer through clear text. So that's what this means. And the good thing is it also shows you which IP address, which user account. So it gives you meaningful information on how to at least address that issue, right? And that is just one thing. And then you also hears about Kerberos delegations, then the printer spooler service running on the domain controllers. There's more and remove dormant entities from sensitive groups. So now let's say if you had a bunch of past domain admins and all you did was just lock them out, this will actually alert you if they haven't been used. So that is another reason for hackers to get in and try to access those accounts, right? By making them active. So back to you, Jason.
Great. Yeah, and you think, you look at this stuff and you think, okay, well, how are we going to get all these alerts? Like, it might seem a little bit overwhelming with security, because not all of us have other things to do with our time than sit here and deal with security. And I'm telling you, just like people used to think, well, how do we install Microsoft Office from the cloud? I'm used to having a CD, and I put it in my machine back in the day, and I install it, plug in the key, whatever, and now I've got to install. What do you mean install Office from the cloud? And so that was a little bit weird transitioning, and now you just use a link and it just now pushes out and it's easy. Well, literally when you install these things onto your desktop or onto your server, or you turn on the service, when you assign the license, all of that data is just there. It just works. You don't have to do much to see the problems that are going on, and often just turning on the service brings so much insight that really helps move things forward, so that you don't have to spend so much time dealing with it. I did notice we have a couple of questions here I also wanted to address. Sorry, I'm not navigating the questions well with the presentation here, but somebody had mentioned about app passwords and what's an alternative. Well, app passwords, if people don't know, is when you have an old, it's kind of an older method of bypassing multi-factor authentication, where you can generate a password for Outlook, let's say, so that if you have multi-factor authentication enabled, that Outlook would still work because it didn't support this modern authentication with MFA. For those of you that have been on Office 365 for a while, and I know some of you guys here have seen, some people who've joined in, and I know most of you, if you've had Office 365 enabled for a while, your tenant may not have had modern authentication turned on. So if it's not on, you need app passwords to make this work when you're starting to enable MFA. If you turn it on in the tenant, it means that Outlook, if it supports it, if you have the newer versions of Outlook, I can't remember where it started exactly, but I think 2016 and newer, supports modern authentication. So when it's on the tenant, Outlook will now use that secure method to connect and prompt for MFA when it launches. So you don't need app passwords anymore for that. So most of the time, keeping all these software versions up to date will remove completely any problems with MFA and app passwords.
So Jason, I want to add a few pointers on that.
Yeah.
So Outlook 2010 doesn't support modern authentication, so that's where we would need an app password. But not that I recommend using Outlook 2010. So 2013 supports modern authentication, but you need to have a registry fix to actually have it start using modern authentication. Outlook 2016 just supports modern authentication out of the box. So one of the reasons why app passwords were used was the native Gmail app on Android phones. They did not support modern authentication for the longest time. Apple was supporting it from a few versions ago. The Samsung's native email app actually supported it, but not the Android Gmail app. But they actually started supporting it a few weeks ago, right? So the only reason for you to use an app password could be for a service account. But then again, service accounts themselves, rather than using app passwords, you just set up an exception for those service accounts, right? So I would actually recommend not using app passwords at all, right? Moving forward.
Yeah, so that's great. And also MFA enables the ability to provide conditional access. I know it doesn't apply anymore, but if people were actually in their office working and not everybody working at home, you could say if the authentication request comes from the IP address of our office, don't prompt for MFA. Assume that they're good to go. So that's another thing. And just a quick note, best practices out there is to make sure all of your software is never more than 2 generations different. So Office 365 obviously keeps upgrading automatically for you. If you keep your Outlook client or your Windows desktop, if somebody's running Windows XP out there or something, or Windows 2003, and trying to use Office 365, it's too many generations apart. So what's 2 generations back from, Windows 10? Well, we got Windows 8, Windows 7, I think was the one before that, 10, 8, 7. I don't know, somebody doesn't know how to count. But and I know Windows 7 is not supported, so maybe not a great example, but don't be running Windows 7 machines with the latest version of Office 365 because of these authentication methods. They make all these things work together and backward compatible for a couple generations. Same thing with Office. If you're still running Microsoft Office 2013 and we're now in 2020, well, you need to be looking at upgrading so that you're not running into issues, because you have to keep up, right? And that's one thing cloud forces us to do, is keep up with where things are at. It's good, it's bad, more work, I guess, keeps us employed, but anyway, it is what it is. So that's my little rant on multi-factor authentication. If you guys still have more questions, feel free to post it. We are getting to them. So the next section is your desktop. Well, a lot of people, I wonder what you guys are running today, for desktop or endpoint protection. Some people run Symantec or Bitdefender or whatever, McAfee or McAfee. I don't know how to pronounce it. Everybody's got different ways, but anyway, yeah, maybe post it in the chat what you guys are doing today, because it'd be interesting for the next slide just to see what's out there. But the Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection is a paid. So Microsoft Defender actually got released, I think, back in Windows, maybe XP, where it was something that was running in the background. Then you installed your other antivirus software, whatever it was, on top of that. Well, they've actually been doing a lot of investment in making this a leader in security for your desktop. So does next generation protection. The great thing is with Microsoft, they've processed so much traffic through their servers. They have access to more information than most companies do out there because of all this corporate traffic that's flowing through their systems. They can see what is going on and identify it. They have teams of people that just sit there and watch for this stuff and any threats. And as soon as threats are identified, they're able to, you're automatically protected because you're using that same engine that these guys are monitoring. It also protects you with old software from that you haven't updated that has vulnerabilities. I'm sure you guys have been using Zoom, right? And there's a client, and people are hacking into people's systems because there's all these vulnerabilities. Well, you want to make sure that if you've got this stuff installed and there's a known issue that's going around and some crypto is exploiting that vulnerability, well, just because you have it installed means that you can get infected. It's that easy. It doesn't take much time. So how do you know, and how do you keep track of all your desktops and the vulnerabilities and what needs to get done? Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection is the answer. So you're going to get to see a few examples here from Sendel of how this might, you already pay for your other service. Well, you can shift it and into Microsoft and you guys can live the dream, which is one vendor to rule them all. Sorry, I like throwing in little jokes in there, keep it interesting, but and that way, because I think everybody's just tired of dealing with so many different products. It's like, let me just use one thing that does everything, and because it's one vendor, all these integrate together. These products, your Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection works with Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection. If you have them both, they report to each other how when there's threats happening. So it actually increases, and no other company does that. So I'll pass it off to Sendel here to show you some of the actual things that we found with the admin portal here.
Thank you, Jason. So before I start actually demoing the portal, I want to make a few points regarding the Microsoft Defender ATP. So the Microsoft Defender ATP is not your Windows Defender service, right? So Windows Defender is the AV that you're seeing on all Windows machines that comes free from Microsoft. So that is just an AV. In this case, Microsoft Defender ATP is actually a next-gen cloud service. And I'll show you why it's a next-gen cloud service. But it uses the Windows Defender as a client, right? So a client that's already installed and already available on all your Windows machines. So you also have the Microsoft Defender ATP for Linux and for Mac as well, in case you want to protect other operating systems, right? So what does this Microsoft Defender ATP do? So it's all about signals. So it sends signals from your computer for various things. So all that the computer is doing, not just your computer, from all other computers around the world. So that way it does this machine learning, so it knows good from bad, right? And I'll show you an example here. So most of the cases in the past where hackers were able to compromise a computer, mostly is based on vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are based on unpatched systems. Sometimes it would be just the Windows OS itself, or could be a third-party app. So Microsoft Defender ATP does not just show you about Microsoft products, but also other products. So we also have, if you see here, the Acrobat Reader PC. You also have Apple iTunes. Then there's a Git, the Intel chipset software, and so on, right? And it also gives you the number of weaknesses. I'm gonna show you, like how each app, how many weaknesses it has, like sort of how many vulnerabilities, right? So it gives you that. And so this is one way of actually checking what's happening or what you need to fix on a computer. And also, let's say you're running Windows updates. You have an update server and you run them. How do you know if it's actually applied, right? So you can actually come to missing KBs. And here we see May 2020 security updates that is still pending, right? So we look at the security recommendations. For example, update this Acrobat Reader DC, and it says this 24 weaknesses. But what are these weaknesses, right? So these are the discovered vulnerabilities based on the software that's running on this particular machine. So you can actually go and read more about it. Like, for example, this is something that's affecting the Wireshark or a Firefox, right? It gives you more information of sorry about that. So one other thing I want to let you know is, so now let's say there are a lot of threats around this world, right? And some are actually more active threats. And what if your CEO is watching the news, and you must all heard about this WannaCry in the past. And if he just walks into your office and says, "Hey, I've been hearing about this WannaCry affecting a lot of computers around the world. Are we affected? Like, is our organization vulnerable? How do you have that answer, right? How do you know? How can you say yes or no to that?" So once you bring all your computers into Microsoft Defender ATP, it actually shows you based on what are the threats out there and how that those threats impact your organization, right? If one or two computers or any of your computers have any threats that can be exposed. Right, so this is one of the things that actually Microsoft Defender does, like give you an overall picture of your organizational security posture. Okay, back to you.
Thanks, Sendel. So, and just so you guys know, if we do actually have one-on-one security workshops that we provide for you guys, for our customers and also our non-customers. So if you're interested in sort of implementing some of this stuff, we can definitely help with it. We do a half day. There's a lot of little nuances that, for instance, you'd think when you buy the licenses that all these services are configured to work together automatically. Well, unfortunately, it's not the case. So you have to, check a box in different areas to make sure that you're enabling the integration between the services, because when they can talk to each other, then it becomes super powerful, and they all work as one cohesive ecosystem of security. We can help get that stuff enabled and just help with your security questions or initiatives overall. Our goal obviously is to be able to, we hope that you would partner with us and purchase your licensing through us to get the benefits of these advisory services. And so definitely, if you're looking for a partner to help with just the overall cloud, because this is just one little piece of security. There's a lot of other factors like Azure Active Directory and how do you enable, your third-party system to authenticate through Azure Active Directory. We can help with all that stuff and get the security in place. So definitely let us know. We're always available. Even if you don't want to switch, it's fine. Talk to us. We just like helping businesses with technology. We're passionate about this stuff. Hopefully you're able to see that. So maybe, you look at our opinions on things, and maybe my opinion, I would have never thought Microsoft would have been here, but here is the day where a third-party Gartner Magic Quadrant, if you guys are familiar with it, they rate multiple companies on different things. So here's where they rate on endpoint protection platforms. This is always moving. This is as of August of last year, and Microsoft continues to make great headway. So they are using You can see they're in the top right. Maybe you'll see your vendor in here that or service that you guys have deployed and where it fits. So enabling Microsoft is becoming a no-brainer for security. The next section here is cloud app security. So now you've got this, you've gone through, you've enabled the synchronization of your users up into the cloud. So they have your Active Directory users are now Office 365 users. Well, one thing I actually found really helpful to understand is Microsoft now has 3 different kinds of Active Directory. So there's Active Directory domain services. That's your domain controller in your Office. They have Azure or Azure, although you and I will have an argument if you say Azure because I like Azure better. Azure Active Directory is Microsoft's copy, I would say, of your on-premise, so all the user accounts get synchronized up there, but it's its own Active Directory, so it's a second level. You can authenticate against that, or you can authenticate against on-prem. You don't need an on-prem account to have or a domain in order to use Azure Active Directory. When you create a user in the Office 365 portal, it's Azure Active Directory. That's your domain controller in the cloud, in a sense. But there's also a third one, which is Azure Active Directory Domain Services. So you say, hey, we want to run servers in the cloud that are connected to Azure Active Directory. Well, we need a domain controller to join these servers too. You can create Azure Active Directory Domain Services, AADDS, and it actually will receive a copy of all the things from Azure Active Directory. Those user accounts get pushed into there so that when you create a virtual machine and connect it to that domain, then it's a standalone environment, but your user accounts are already populated and it's not pushed from here to Azure Active Directory. It's actually pushed from Azure Active Directory, your Office 365, to this domain. So those user accounts can be given permissions to servers and other things. We do a lot of work with companies moving servers into the cloud. Definitely let me know if you have any questions, since it's a little bit off topic. But what does Azure Active Directory do? It gives people the ability to add access to services in your organization, like mailboxes and things. This is cloud app security. You don't want people providing, Microsoft gives your users by default the ability to allow remote services to access your data. Well, you should probably know or lock down or do whatever you need to do, but if you don't know about it, then how do you know that this is even happening? So these services, enabling them, gives you the ability to see what's going on. So Sendel is actually just going to show you what MCAS is all about and how people are providing access and what you can do about it. Go ahead, Sendel.
Thank you, Jason. So I want to talk about MCAS, but before that, I want to do a quick point on the Gartner report where you saw Microsoft on the top, right? So there is a private question wherein they asked, is Microsoft on top just because of all the billions of computers out there that they have this Defender installed? So that report is not based on the number of deployed activations of products, but based on the ability to execute, right? So it's not just about endpoint product, but endpoint protection platform. So you're talking about this whole cloud platform, which actually does more than just take care of viruses, right? I mean, that's what I want to mention. Now back to MCAS. So before I actually talk about this particular example, I want to give you sort of a background. So where does this auth app come in, or where this whole concept come in? I'll give a small example. So now let's say you are looking up a music service, right? And you want to sign up for the music service. So, and if you go to the service, you either have an option of putting in your first name, last name, your email address, and hold on. Yeah, sorry about that. I thought, yeah, my screen was shared, but it wasn't. Okay. So let's say you're signing up for this music service. So you have an option of either signing up for the service by filling up a form where you give your first name, last name, your email address, and you generate a password, or there's an option of just signing in with your Gmail account, right? So now let's say you sign in with your Gmail account. So what that music service is getting permission from you is to use the first name, last name, email address that is used by your Gmail service, right? So that information gets transferred over to music based on a permission, not the password, because when you try to sign up for the music service with the Gmail account, the music service redirects your logging in process to Gmail. You log in there and Gmail says, okay, so this user has given permission for the music service to log in, right? And then you come back to the music service and you log in, right? That is just a small example. So likewise, you also have enterprise apps out there which do the same thing and where they get permission from you, various levels of permissions, right? It's just either your first name, last name, or access to your calendar, or access to your entire mailbox. And they will show you that, or ask you rather for permission, and you just simply by clicking yes, you get in. And I'll show you why this is actually a bigger threat to you than even your MFAs or other policies, because let's say you have the user secured by MFA and even by a strong password, and let's say the user got compromised, right? When you see other threat vectors, so you can go and change the password, right? You can change the person's password or change even the MFA device. But if a person has given access to an app, right, that it's more like a web hook, right, wherein that permission is always there, despite the person changing their password. So that's why this actually is a good thing, where it actually gives visibility where they have access. I'll show you one example wherein this software, Calendly, this is a third-party software wherein people from, if you want to set up a meeting, you just log on to the service, you let the service access to your calendar, and let's say someone wants to meet, this service will actually look at the free times of all the other participants and come up with propose a time or a couple of times, right? But it does that based on access to your calendar, and you're actually giving permission. So likewise, you have other apps doing that. So this is just one part of this MCAS, Microsoft Cloud App Security. So earlier I showed you about this identity security posture. So this is where you see Microsoft, all the cloud services working in tandem with each other, right? So we had Azure ATP getting all those signals from your domain controller, but that is actually being sent over to this Cloud App Security, wherein you can take actions, right? So in the past for workshops, I used to actually create like fake alerts just to give demos, but I'm going to show you an actual alert here, right? So we're looking at data exploitation to an unsectioned app, right? So this is not an app that we have actually sectioned for use, but someone's actually sending out data. So where this comes in help is, let's say if someone has a personal Dropbox and let's say they're trying to take corporate data and actually siphon it away, you get alerted. So in this case, a user was trying to upload a video to Facebook, right? But it just goes to show the power. So how do I get to know about this particular step, where and how much data was uploaded to Facebook? Again, going back to Microsoft Defender ATP. So you have the Windows Defender client, right, sending all those signals, and from those signals, that's where we derive that this person has uploaded 1.4 gig of data to Facebook, right? This is where the power of the cloud comes in. Back to you.
So I'm sure you guys feel like you're drinking out of a fire hose a bit. Just to try to simplify and recap quickly what we've covered so far, we've got your email protection through Office 365 ATP. Detonates things before your users, before it allows your users access, plus covers a lot of other protection methods in there. You've got Azure advanced threat protection, which is your domain controllers. It sends an agent that sends security issues up to this reporting service for analysis. You've got Microsoft Defender, ATP, which is your desktop protection. Paid service brings them all together into a central place to get to see what all your desktops are doing. MCAS, which is provides you that sort of end-to-end picture of what's been going on, as Sendel had just described. Well, all of these things lead you to how are we doing overall? Well, Microsoft has a thing called Secure Score, and again, I know this is a lot. This is why having us there is helpful, because then we can just help you filter through all the things you actually don't need to worry about, because maybe half of this doesn't apply to your organization, and you just need MFA enabled. And what do we need to think about for that? So having a partner that can tell you that stuff is important. But Microsoft Secure Score gives you the entire real estate of your security. It's like a report card. I was introduced, and maybe you guys know this already, but I didn't really know what gamification was. And gamification is like a game where you get a score. It's like when I was in school, I get 30 out of 100. On any topics other than technology, and that's not a good score. Well, you want to, when you see Microsoft grades your organization as well, and maybe you'll probably not be doing as well as you hope, but gives you all the suggestions of what you can do to improve, like a great teacher. So they tell you, here's, if you just do this one thing, you're going to up your score by 10%, or 10 points. And you can actually give this, if you've got IT people, or you've got a managed service provider, or you've got us, you can have things that they can go through and in order of priority of what they need to address to make things more secure. Because oftentimes you sit there and you think, okay, what's the next thing I can do? Or maybe you're in that position, unless you're firefighting all the time. But this moves you into a proactive model where you're addressing issues before they cause major problems from a security perspective. Secure Score is a great portal to do that. So I'll let Sendel show you what that looks like and how it prioritizes things you can accomplish.
Thank you, Jason. So before I talk more about the Secure Score, I just want to talk about my personal beliefs, right? So I read a lot of articles, and a lot of them talk about, like what you can do to improve security, right? And most of them, either show points or, like a certain topics. And I'm thinking, like, how does this apply to my organization in particular, right? So I have a unique situation and a unique setup, and how does that actually apply, and what I can do to make it better? Because I'm sure, like most of you are, like Jason's point, you're actually fighting fire, right? So putting out fires rather, and but you still want to do something better to make your security posture, like increase your security posture, but you want to take definitive steps and do less, right? So take definitive steps, but address them in such a way that, okay, let me take care of this particular thing that actually impacts most in my organization, right? And that's where this whole Secure Score comes in. So the Secure Score is based on signals from your organization, right? So again, it's data coming in from all the different technologies, and they all feed into the Secure Score. So the Microsoft portal, the security portal, understands the makeup of your existing security posture and gives you recommendations based on that. And again, they do go based on points as well. So certain things could be just 1 point, 2 points, certain things 5 points, based on how they can affect your organization. So one thing I do have to give you a warning, when you look at our history, if you see, it has actually gone down. The reason for that is, so we actually moving on to a newer Secure Score. So we had this older one, then we went on to a preview, and we have this new method. So what Microsoft is doing with the new Secure Score is it's taking out some of the recommendations that are just policy based, right, and more into condition based. So what that means is, so now let's say there was a particular recommendation wherein have an Android policy in Intune. Yeah, okay, fine. Like you set up an Android policy in Intune and you get 5 points for that. But what if you don't even have any Android devices, or if it's not even affecting or having any policies or affecting any of any Android device? So that doesn't really help you in this case, right? So that's what Microsoft is trying to do with this new secure score, wherein they're taking away most of the policy based and going into condition based, where it actually affects your devices or users, right? And this is an ongoing thing. So now let's say you set up a point, and if you look at over here, right, 8 points regress. So those are, and I'm going to show you one more example. 1 point regress for remove the older TLS. So this happened when we just booted up an old computer that was disposed, right? I just want to show you wherein it's an ongoing thing. It's more like an active. It's not like you set it and forget it. It's constantly checking your network to see if you've gone back, or like if and one admin has set up a security control, and what if weeks later and another admin removes it, just for the sake of convenience. So that will actually show up over here. So this is something constant that can actually keep checking. And yeah, so Microsoft just changed this new secure score for us. I already do have some security controls that do not show up yet. So maybe for the next workshop, we'll have an upward slide going up. Yeah, back to you, Jason.
Great. So, and none of it is to look at it like we're failing. It's more just how do we get better, right? And companies are always looking to innovate and to grow. And security is one of those things. It's a moving target. Obviously, and if Microsoft keeps moving the bar and attackers keep moving the bar, then it's just something that we can use to see how we're doing. But the way they easily present it for us to look at makes it nice. And intuitive, and it seems more English without getting into major security costs for other systems. It's there for you. You actually have access to this today. It's not going to show you all the details if you don't have all the licenses, but it'll show you what you do have licenses for, and those types of threats. But the more systems that are feeding into Microsoft that you're using, the more information you'll see everywhere relevant to your organization.
Jason, if you don't mind, there is a question that I want to answer. So it is, if we have these ATPs enabled, do we still need antivirus apps? We currently use Carbon Black products. So I want to answer that. So what I really like about Microsoft technologies, right? I mean, yeah, you asked me 10 years back. Yes, I might have given you a different answer, but based on what I've been seeing the last few years, it's all about the big picture, right? So when you ask what's the big picture, so now let's say you had a data breach, right? So you want to know what happened, when it happened, or how much of data they, actually got out, and how do they even get how did your users get compromised? So by using all of the Microsoft products, including or replacing your Carbon Black with the Microsoft Defender, so you can start by, so now let's say a person gets compromised with an email, right? So with the Office 365 ATP, that gives a signal wherein which email the user clicked on, right? And then the Defender ATP will actually show you, I mean, this is in case if you had a breach, right? Show you like how that particular computer got affected, and if any other computers got affected as well. And then with the MCAS, you get to see if person actually used SharePoint and what data or what files were accessed, right? So this is all about the big picture, right? Or rather the whole picture, telling a story. That's what they say. You get to know what actually happened. And this is where all the different ATP technologies come into play.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Yeah, and one slide one of the demos I've seen, they show you the picture of as things are propagating or infecting your environment, how having all of these systems speak to each other, you can see the machines who transmitted it when to whom, and which machines have been impacted. And maybe I'm stating again what Sendel said, but just seeing the graphic representation, like, and you can see it because maybe somebody gets infected and then that malware is now trying to do a brute force on your domain controller or something, or maybe it's scanning open ports. Well, all these things see that traffic, and then Microsoft shows it very easily who has been impacted by a threat, which machines it's successfully propagated to, and then so you can come up with a plan on how to clean it. Otherwise, and the name of the game is visibility, not just because that's our company name, but if you don't see, you're blind, you're in the dark, and you don't want to be blind when threats are happening. If your organization says, how did this happen? Your response should be, well, remember, you didn't approve the budget to buy these licenses. Well, that decision removes our ability to see what's going on. And so this is the business cases. Don't let yourself as IT be the fall people when problems happen. You should be bringing this to the organization and say, now that we're using cloud more, we need to be able to see what's happening on the cloud, and our licenses just don't cover that for us in many cases. So if we want to actually see what's going on and see when problems are happening, we need budget for those licenses. If they say no, then your hands are clean, and it's like, okay, well, when a problem happens, you can't come to us and say we should have protected ourselves. So it's kind of just something to think about. Now we'll move on. We're almost finished here, but thanks for the great questions, and so glad you guys have been with us through this. And I know we're scratching the surface. We got a lot more knowledge in here, and I'm trying to make this as easy as we can for you guys to digest. People do ask about Intune. Where does it come into play? And Intune is another component that allows us to implement configuration changes that we want to make and secure based on the security recommendations, because maybe the system will say, well, you need to do X, and it's like, well, how do I do X? Well, you need like something to push out policy or settings, whatever the case is, to your devices to implement that. Intune is often used to manage devices and to enforce compliance and access policies for your system. So most organizations don't have all of this stuff turned on today. Think of this as, where's the goal line? Most people are still right at the beginning with MFA, but at least you're informed. You're getting informed as to where you need to be heading and thinking about in the future, because this is groundbreaking stuff. We're working, even banks currently, like we've spoken with TD and CIBC and some other organizations that are working to implement these things. And you don't have to be a big company to use it. You just have to buy the licenses and be informed. It helps a lot. So did you have anything to add, Sendel, on the Intune side?
Yes, I do wish to add. So one thing about Microsoft products is they are constantly evolving. When I actually was working on Intune years back, so Intune was mostly known as an MDM product, right? Like mobile device management. So all it was done or used was to manage your mobile devices. So where does Intune fit in with all these other ATP technologies, right? So all these ATP technologies that we demoed and spoke about are technologies that actually give you visibility on what is happening in your organization. So where does Intune fit in? It actually enforces now conditions. So now let's say you want to have a change, a positive change, and you want to enforce on how people connect or what devices, what state of devices you wanted them to be, that's where Intune comes in. I'll give you a small example. So now let's say, okay, most of the people are working from home. Most or some do have work computers, but what about users that do have just personal computers? So, and you're thinking, okay, you know what, I'm going to let people use their personal computers, but I want to make sure that the personal computers are up to date, like Windows updates are, are up to date, that they have an active antivirus, that is not only have an active antivirus, but also that it's updated, and they have a browser that as well is updated, right? So if they meet all these conditions, then they can access my corporate apps or even Outlook web access for that matter. So how do you enforce this? Using Intune, right? You use policies of Intune. That's where Intune fits in with the big picture.
There you go. And most people don't, to be honest, most people don't even have this part set up in their organization. It's just something that can be, and at least you're being introduced to the concepts and the tools. So one conversation that's been interesting from a business perspective, and I'd ask for a show of hands here, but how many people have been approached by the organization saying, hey, our insurance policy renewal is coming up, and they're asking all these new questions about our data protection methods, and insurance premiums are going up for businesses because people are recognizing, insurance companies recognize that there's massive vulnerabilities and costs now that they're needing to insure against. What happens if your whole organization gets breached and data encrypted and you can't get it back? Well, now they have to pay out potentially. And so insurance is becoming a massive thing, especially with cloud. So Canada, the US, and other countries are working on developing standards. So I'll just let Sendel attended an event here from the federal government where they're working with partners like us. And so I'm just going to let him quickly just brief us on what this Cyber Secure Canada is.
Thanks, Jason. So the Innovation, Science and Economic Development Ministry invited a select few MSPs to discuss the cyber secure certification, right? And we were actually privileged to be invited as well. They wanted our input regarding the implementation. They did mention that they were in talks with the insurance companies on how they could have like an Energy Star type of rebates. Because one thing the insurance companies mentioned was they're doing a lot of payouts for ransomware, right? Where companies get ransomware, and because they're insured, they just go to their insurance companies for the payouts, right? So this is something that was a big topic coming out from the insurance companies. So the ministry was also in talks with Microsoft, who did mention that their cloud solutions align with the security controls required by the certification, right? So to be certified, you have to have a few security controls in place and then be audited. So Microsoft's solutions actually are aligned with those security controls, which means at some point you can even just print out, right, saying that you have these controls in place, right? In fact, in the future, I wouldn't be surprised if they require the certification as mandatory, for federal contracts. So one thing that actually came up in that meeting was, so one of them said, like, what if a client does not have any data, right? If they don't have anything, why should they even go in for, like all this ATPs, right? Any threat protection. And this is what I had to say. If you look at the big enterprises or even banks, they put in a geo protection. So if they're not doing businesses with other countries in the world, they set up that only, let's say, North American companies, right? So either our users from Canada or US, these are the only users or IP addresses that can access their websites or products. So they have this geo restriction in place. So what do the hackers do? They just hack into any small vulnerable company or a device and use that to launch attacks within, right? So you have your reputation at stake there, or even legal ramifications. So that's why even if you do not have data of anything of value, the mere fact that you are based in North America itself is gold for hackers. Yeah.
Yeah. So even if this may not apply to you today, being in a proactive situation where you have the security you're already thinking about security and it's not coming last minute, where you've already thought about it and said, we need to really put in some best practices. Let's do it today, because, you know, who knows, maybe next year you won't get insured unless you have them there, and now you're going to be scrambling. So we want to arm you with the to be proactive and just to think about it. So so that's pretty much it. That's all we got. But some of the key takeaways: just make sure, send out an email even today, just to the teams, reminding them, you know, just to make sure that they're watching out for malicious emails. And there's been a rise in that. You know, if there's things that are links that you see, don't click them. And not just that, but you have to have a way to monitor when you have abnormal access. If you don't know, maybe there could, today, maybe every one of you has hackers already accessing mailboxes in your organization, and they are working ways to continue to infiltrate, and you don't know. So you have to have these licenses on to see when this is happening. Make sure you have MFA enabled for at least admin users. So if you're if you have admin rights, turn on MFA, just get started with it and see what it's like for you. You don't have to do it across the board, but you should eventually. And if you're using MFA, one quick note, there's an app called Microsoft Authenticator. I think you just look up Authenticator in the App Store, and that's the best way, because you log in using your credentials into the Authenticator app, and then and that way all the MFA requests are encrypted and they can't be hacked that way. If you use just a cell phone with text messaging, hackers are actually already all over that one, so they're able to find a way to get a copy of those text messages to approve themselves. So just something to think about. Text messaging is actually not really recommended for a second factor, but it's there. And then,
Jason, if you don't mind, I want to add a few points on MFA. Sure. So first thing is, so the Microsoft MFA is free. It comes as part of your service. So you can actually turn it on, and you don't have to turn it on for everybody. You can do for a subset of users. And to Jason's point, do not use text-based MFA because there's something called SIM jacking, wherein someone can just call your telco and just say, you know what, okay, I just want to transfer the number over, right? So they can transfer the number over and have all the MFA authentications in there. So only two types of authentication methods that we recommend. One is the push notifications and the passcodes that actually show up on your phone. So these two methods actually use your physical phone, right? Your cell phone or mobile phone as a security device, because there's one more option wherein you can have the code sent to a regular phone, right? Your office phone. I do not recommend that, because anybody sitting next to an office phone can just pick up the phone and get those codes, right? So that's why you rather go in just with these two options, wherein your push notifications are a passcode on your mobile device.
Great. Yeah, install security tools in your desktops and servers, and make sure that your backup systems are protecting you, that they have ransomware protection in the backup, because if they don't, then your backups are vulnerable, and the last thing you want is, you know, tomorrow you come in and find out, shoot, we just got cryptoed. And yeah, so just double check that, make sure you're good. If you want a quick backup solution, we can do that to Azure. It's cheap these days. We can help out with that. So if you have, you know, questions,
Jason, sorry, I want to add a couple of points, if you don't mind,
sure.
on the Azure backup. So one thing about Azure backup, it also has a fail-safe method. So now let's say you have a malicious employee, right? What if the person actually deletes the backup, right? So you actually have a fail-safe method wherein you can actually go in and retrieve any deleted backups for 14 days, right? So you have that. And one other thing about, I've been, you know, in discussion with users, they say, hey, you know what, I have a good backup, right? I test my backups, so why do I need all this additional threat protection if I just have good backup, right? So I don't care if I get compromised. I'm just going to recover from my backup. And this is what I have to say. So there are a lot of hackers out there, or bad actors, who know this, right? So what they try to do is they actually try to shame you by putting your data out there. So they say, you know what, so you're not going to pay me, fine. So I'm just going to take all the data that I got through the data breach, and I'm just going to post it out on the internet, right? So that's something that you need to be wary of.
Thanks, Sendel. Yeah, so if you have any questions about this and you want to have a one-on-one workshop, feel free. John posted my contact or my email address in the chat. I know you guys, many of you already have it, but feel free to send me an email. We've been super busy, just FYI, with moving companies to the cloud. So it's been a little bit tough to manage the influx on our side, but we are. So if there's a bit of a delay, I will get back to you, and definitely interested in having a chat just to see how you guys are doing and if we haven't touched base in a while. And yeah, so thanks again for joining us today, and stay safe, and look forward to hopefully connecting again through and maybe another presentation in the future. All right, thanks everyone. Take care.